the need for ECA, if I may. We just heard from Dr McConnell before about AEMO and the whole energy planning regulation model, including the three market bodies, is very good at being transparent, but it's not very good at being accountable. Was that lack of accountability one of the reasons or a driver for ECA to be stood up?
Pat, I think we're speaking back to the past. I might see if my colleagues have anything to add to that, but I think you've probably got me at a bit of a loss there, Mr Chairman, in the sense that in the 10 years since we've been there, there has been some turnover, so I'm not really fully conversant with the originating history of the entity. I don't know if Dr French has got anything he wants to add to that.
Thank you, Michael. Mr Chairman, I can give you a little background, if you like, to the establishment of ECA. There's a couple of reasons I think that it was deemed that there needed to be an expert voice for consumers to represent not just consumer experience, but also the standing of consumers in decisions that affect them with regard to energy. As you know very well, it's a deeply complex and sometimes quite arcane area filled with economists and engineers, and so it's very hard for consumer advocates to engage with a lot of the policy work the governments, market bodies, regulators and others engage in. And so it was deemed that there needed to be a body with sufficient resourcing and technical know-how to be able to represent the consumer voice and also to be able to turn to consumer organisations and build their capacity to engage in those processes, so as to be sort of an intervening body. The other thing, of course, is 10 years ago, the NEM was gathering steam. There was a knowledge that there was going to be very considerable changes coming in the energy system, as we've seen, and so it would be good to have a foundational consumer voice available to represent their interests.
Thank you. It's on the public record, but one of the key drivers for this inquiry was the fact that while the Senate can call Australian Energy Regulator to Senate estimates, we can't call AEMO or AEMC to Senate estimates. And so there is no pathway for those organisations, particularly AEMO with its huge planning authority and the enormous amounts of investments that it drives forward. Without that accountability, consumers can't have much of a view about how that work is being done on their behalf. Would you agree?
I would say ECA's perspective on this is that we're fortunate to be able to engage with AEMO and the other market bodies quite regularly. I meet with them every month, every couple of months, and as the committee may well know, we've been invited by Commonwealth and jurisdictional ministers to attend the Energy and Climate Change Ministerial Council. This gives us the opportunity to represent the interests of consumers, to articulate the particular issues that consumers are facing at that time, to illustrate the changing sentiment or attitudes, behaviours, impacts on consumers. Chairman, you may know that we have conducted a very extensive range of surveys now for the entire decade that we've been in existence, and that information we provide to the market bodies and others to feed into their considerations. And so from our perspective, we engage very closely with the market bodies, and we've got very good relationships. And when it comes to the ISP that you mentioned, we provide submissions to, as you know, the ISP has grown in scope and consideration over the years. We believe it's a good document, and in fact, many of the organisations that we talk with internationally feel that it's among best in class. There are elements that we know AEMO and governments are looking to extend the aegis of that report, and I heard you mention earlier in the hearings today, Chair, that there might be value in having the ISP represent a broader whole of system consideration rather than its historical focus on generation and transmission, and we support that. So we feel that there's a lot of discussion of the work that AEMO, AMC and the AR do, and certainly their engagement with consumer bodies has historically been strong.
Thank you. As far as I'm aware, I don't believe that there is in any other energy markets around the world, a market operator that also has the role as central planner. You said you compared against other jurisdictions. Can you name any that do it that way?
Not in terms of central planning, Chair, more with regard to the picture that the ISP document gives of the next 20, 25 years. I think as a document it's very helpful for people to be able to perceive what planning opportunities exist over the next generation. And we would like to see the document broadened to include, for example, elements regarding the distribution network and also consumer energy resources to give a broader whole of system insight. Because as you say, it is hard for consumers and consumer organisations to really be able to engage with some of this because it is a highly technical domain.
Thank you. And you mentioned the ISP comes out of its historical transmission planning background. We're now at the sixth ISP, fourth ISP over 6 years, yet it's still focusing on transmission almost entirely. As energy consumers, are you not concerned that we're not getting a whole of system view out of this planning process?
Certainly we think that a whole of system view is in everyone's best interest, consumers, decision makers and others.
Just one last question. In your role, and you say you get to you get to put questions to them, etc. I don't remember seeing any. And this is a genuine question. Do you publish any reports on ECA's view of AEMO's performance, how the transition's rolling out, how we are bringing down emissions, or any other measurement or accountability on behalf of consumers?
Chairman, our focus, as you might expect, is very much on consumer experience, particularly with regard to supply, affordability, reliability and so on. Our role really isn't to critique the market bodies or to provide sort of performance assessment of their work. I imagine that's more a matter for government and others.
But those roles happen. Every energy company does that role. There's lots of bodies that do that role, fair trading, etc. I would have thought you were in the unique position to take a much more critical eye over what's happening on behalf of energy consumers.
We are very actively engaged in conversations with market bodies and governments and others, and as you mentioned, Chairman, we do a lot of work when it comes to reports and submission writing and providing an empirical data set for decision makers to use so that they can ensure that the decisions they make have all the best reference they can manage to consumer interests. This is something that we take very, very, very seriously. As you would be aware, and as Dr. Schaefer mentioned, we also provide a grants function which allows any number of organisations, whether it's academic institutions, individual practitioners, community organisations, advocacy bodies and others, to examine their place in the energy system and to provide input into network resets and retailer price discussions and government and market body policies. And so we provide a broad range of services to enable that conversation to occur.
I'm sure you do. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask first, I think you're doing some work on, I think you mentioned, doing some work on small businesses, the cost of electricity to small businesses, particularly I think you've got something called a Small Business Tariff Tracker. Could you just outline what that work is and what the results of it show? I mean, have electricity prices for small businesses increased over the last couple of years?
Dr. Haber, I'm happy to take that question, if you wish. Yes, you're right, Senator. We do quite a lot of work with small businesses across a variety of engagements. One that we have historically done is focus on the retail price that small and medium enterprises pay for their energy usage, electricity and gas. And what this does is it allows a sort of a longitudinal view of published energy prices that small businesses pay. And what that has shown is in line with the rest of the consumer segments, prices have gone up over the last number of years, particularly in that period in and around the middle of 2022 when we saw prices spike in the markets.
What's sort of been the rough average increases for small businesses, let's say, in the last 2 years?
Well, it depends on jurisdiction, so it depends on state and the nature of the contracts that are used. What we have access to, Senator, is published prices. Now, of course, as you know, consumer bodies, whether they're households in the retail market or small businesses, can negotiate their own contracts, and also there are many suppliers to whom they can go for better deals. What we have seen is something in the order, depending on jurisdiction, of a sort of 8 to 20% increase over the last 2 to 3 years. Again, state by state, the circumstances differ.
It was 8% nationally last year.
8% last year.
8%